妈，哎，你别咬我不？摸摸吧，摸摸。哎呀，妈呀，有点害怕呢。摸摸。哎呦妈呀，出了一身毛，都是皮包骨了，看你。来，不能咬我啊！哎，好狗，摸摸，摸摸，哎。
On the Tibetan plateau, where the sky is a deep shade of blue that seems within reach and the wind blows ceaselessly. Among the snow-capped mountains, a young Chinese couple has chosen a lifestyle that sets them apart from the rest of the world. They live in an old Hyundai, not a rugged pickup truck or a modern motorhome. It's a weathered vehicle that's lost its paint over the years, but it has persevered, traversing rocky roads, winding mountain passes, and freezing nights below 0 degrees. Luang, a former programmer from Guangzhou, and An, a bank employee, had stable careers. However, after a loved one's untimely passing, they made a drastic decision. They quit their jobs, sold their apartment, bought an old car, and embarked on a journey to reconnect with nature, to live life surrounded by the sky and the earth. Tibet was a destination they had always dreamed of, not for tourism, but because it held something pure that cities had long lost. The engine roared softly in the biting chill of early morning, their breath visible as white mist inside the cabin. No snow fell, but the outside temperature hovered around 2 degrees Celsius. The dry, biting cold of the highlands made even the steering wheel tremble in their hands. The car stopped on a deserted mountain slope, and before them stood a massive creature covered in a thick, dark coat, its color indistinguishable as brown, black or red beneath the matted, dirty fur that resembled a forgotten clump of dry moss. A Tibetan Mastiff wandered nearby, sniffing around rocks and occasionally scratching at the dry grass as if searching for food. Without a collar or any signs of injury, it was clear the dog was hungry and filthy. Its once proud coat, a hallmark of the breed, was now matted, tangled, and caked with dirt and twigs. What was strange was, it didn't seem to fear humans at all. When it saw the car stop and the door open, it simply raised its head and looked straight at them. Its gaze wasn't panicked or wary, but rather as if it was considering something. The dog stared intently at his hand, then at the water bottle. Slowly it stood up, walked over, and began lapping up the water in small sips, as if it hadn't had clean water in a long time. An stood beside him, gazing at the matted fur and shuddering. What was once a protective coat against the cold now felt like a burden. Mud, dirt, sand, and dry grass were all tangled together, forming heavy, dirty clumps. "We can't just leave it like this," she said. "The vet is still far away, probably in Lunzub town," Luang replied. "That's at least a dozen more hours." "Then let's just cut off the worst of it for now," An said, opening her personal toolkit. No clippers, no grooming comb, just an old pair of scissors with a cracked plastic handle, but it was the best they had. They led the dog to a flat patch of ground near the car. It didn't react strongly. When An brought the scissors close, the dog merely turned its head and let out a sigh, as if it was too exhausted to resist. As the scissors touched the first layer of fur, not fur, but a dry, matted clump stuck with sand, grass, and dirt, An had to press gently, teasing out each snarl, cutting and disentangling bit by bit. With each snip, a clump of fur the size of a palm fell to the ground, heavy and sodden like wet moss. Some spots refused to cut through, partly because the scissors were dull, partly because the dirt and debris had bonded with the fur like cement. Some clumps had dry grass stuck in them, others were tangled like rope. An's hand grew tired, her fingers numb from the cold. But she persisted, cutting slowly. The dog would occasionally flinch, not from pain, but because its skin was being stretched. Yet it didn't growl or turn its head. It just breathed harder, its eyes never leaving the man holding its neck. Underneath the thick fur lay grayish skin with a few minor scrapes, but no bleeding. It seemed the dog had slept outdoors for days. Dirt and debris had accumulated under its belly and armpits, areas An had to handle with care, cutting gently. After working on half the body, she was panting. The wind continued to blow, carrying the scent of earth and dog fur. Her hands were numb and cold. Luong took over, continuing to cut the dog's flanks and tail. The scissors were almost blunt, making a dry, snapping sound with each cut. Nearly an hour passed. The sun had risen higher, casting a bit of warmth on their shoulders. On the ground lay a pile of matted fur, caked with dirt and smelling wild and earthy. But the dog looked significantly more relieved. It stood up, shaking its body vigorously. The remaining bits of dry grass fell away. Then it walked over to the water bottle, lapped up a few more sips, ate a biscuit, and turned to look at the couple with calm, amber eyes as if in silent gratitude. Late in the afternoon of the next day, the Hyundai Galloper slowly rolled into Lahunzub town, a small town nestled halfway up the Tibetan plateau. Sheltering under the snow-capped mountains, the wind was still biting, but the town felt like a warm note in the harsh symphony of the highlands. It was scared, not of the people, but of the unfamiliar space before it, the smell of disinfectant, the clicking sounds inside the clinic, the noises that seemed to stir unpleasant memories deep within its instincts. The remaining fur, thick and coarse like an old mat, was scraped away in slow strokes. Clumps fell to the floor, covering it in a layer of dirt. The doctor found a few small swellings beneath the fur, likely from insect bites or prolonged exposure to the ground, but nothing serious. Next came the bath. Warm water was prepared, and the gentle scent of soap wafted through the air. The assistant scrubbed every area thoroughly with her hands, paying special attention to the ears and neck, the dirtiest parts. Heiko shuddered slightly when the water touched his back, but didn't struggle. An stood by, her eyes soft and gentle, looking at the dog like a child who had finally been cleaned up after days of wandering. Finally, the vet cleaned the dog's ears. They were clogged with a lot of dirt and wax, and administered a vaccine shot for rabies and hepatitis. Heiko flinched when the needle pricked its skin, but didn't yelp. It simply turned its head, glanced at An, and let out a sigh. "This one's a good boy," the vet said with a smile. "Most mastiffs can be quite aggressive, but he's unusually well-behaved." After being dried off, the old matted coat was gone, revealing Heiko's true form, large, rugged, but gaunt. Its amber eyes seemed even more striking, exuding a sense of solitude and pride. The vet concluded, "He's not suffering from any serious illnesses. With proper nutrition, a dry place to sleep, and good care, he'll recover quickly." As the sun set on the way back out, Heiko glanced back at the clinic one last time. It knew the journey was far from over, and it had been chosen. The Hyundai Galloper turned out of town, kicking up red dust and trailing the last rays of sunlight. Ahead lay roads without clear paths, nights camping in the mist, and silent mornings amidst the mountains. A night passed. It was the first night Heiko truly slept. No more curling up shivering beside cold rocks. No more howling winds or lurking shadows to frighten it. Just a makeshift tent pitched on the plateau. Inside, an old mat, two people lying close together in sleeping bags, and a massive mastiff curled up in the corner, breathing steadily like the wind rustling through a mountain pass. For the first time in days, it was taken for a walk. Luong clipped a leash to its collar, gentle as if leading a child. Mimi trotted behind, chirping and wagging her tail. Heiko walked slowly, sniffing at each clump of grass, its nose lightly brushing over the tracks left by nocturnal creatures. Its ears perked up with interest. Just a few minutes, but the way it held its head high, its strides long and straight, showed the spirit of a Tibetan Mastiff was returning. At noon that day, they stopped near an abandoned house. For the first time, Heiko played. The two dogs, one as big as a calf, the other small and fluffy like a ball of cotton, chased each other around old rocks and scrawny bushes. The sun shone on Heiko's newly shaved coat, bringing out a healthy dark brown hue, and suddenly felt a stinging sensation in her eyes. Something, unwatched the scene, had returned from the wild and awakened from silence. On the morning of the third day, they hit the road again. The Hyundai rolled away from the abandoned house. Inside, Mimi curled up in An's lap, while Heiko, now clean and smelling of soap, lay relaxed in the back row, its head resting on Luong's backpack. On the fourth day, the sun was already high, casting golden light on the snow-capped mountain peaks. The wind was no longer biting like needles, but milder, carrying the dry scent of the barren land. The Hyundai stopped in a small, nameless town, far from tourist spots. This place felt like the edge of the world. A scattering of rusty tin-roofed houses, an old general store with a faded sign, and an empty, dusty square. The town was almost deserted, with hardly anyone passing by. They parked by the side of the road in front of an abandoned car repair shop. While An was pouring water and Luong was getting instant noodles and sausages from the trunk, Mimi suddenly let out a soft bark. From a distance, 3 lumpy silhouettes appeared. They were 3 stray dogs. They stood about 10 meters away, not daring to come closer. Their fur was matted. 2 of them were skinny to the bone, and the third, smaller one, probably still a puppy, had a hind leg that seemed injured. Their eyes were fixed intently on the small pan that Luong had just placed on the portable gas stove. There was no growling, no approaching, just the gaze of starving creatures. Heiko noticed them too. It didn't bark, just stood beside An, ears perked up, watching. No defensive posture, no aggression, just observation. An glanced at Luong. "Can we give them a little bit?" Luong nodded. A moment later, the skinniest dog slowly approached. It sniffed, then began to eat. The other 2 were hesitant at first, but eventually joined in. They ate ravenously, but didn't fight or snarl. There was only the sound of gulping down food and satisfied lip-licking, as if it had been a long time since any of them had eaten a full meal. After the small meal, the 3 dogs didn't immediately leave. They lay down in the shade of the Hyundai, looking up when they heard the soft hiss of the gas stove, their eyes seeming more at peace, as if they had just encountered an oasis in the desert. Heiko quietly stepped closer without barking or doing anything. It just stood there, looking at the starving dogs as if it had once been one of them itself. But the journey wouldn't wait for anyone. At noon that day, when the sun was at its peak, Luong and An packed up, took down the tent, and got back in the car. Mimi had already dozed off in An's lap. Heiko was the last to get in, and before it did, it turned its head back for a moment. The 3 stray dogs still sat there. They didn't chase after the car, didn't howl. They just sat in silence, their eyes seeming to express gratitude without needing words. The car drove away, kicking up dust on the road. The small town returned to its quietness. But on the corner of the wall by the roadside, where the scent of food lingered, there would remain the warmth of a midday moment when wanderers met not with fangs bared, but with sharing. On the 5th day, they left the small town at dawn, when the sun had yet to rise above the mountain peaks. The sky was gray and gloomy, the wind carrying a strange scent, a mix of cold ice and damp earth being stirred. On the local radio, Tibetan and Chinese voices crackled in and out, with only a few words clear. Temperature drop, early snow, traffic warning. But they kept going. As night fell, they had no choice but to spend the night in the car. Long spread a thin blanket on the back seat, unlit a small gas stove in the trunk, cooking instant noodles with some dried beef. Heiko lay at the foot of the seat, its head buried in an old quilt. Mimi was snuggled up in a sleeping bag with An breathing steadily. No one spoke. The only sound was the snow falling like sand on the car roof, layer by layer. Night descended quickly. Outside was an impenetrable darkness. Inside the car was a small haven of warmth, where 2 humans and 2 animals huddled together, waiting for the one thing they couldn't control, the weather. The next morning, a miracle happened. The sun appeared. The snow had stopped falling some time during the night. Sunlight filtered through the gaps in the clouds, casting its rays on the road. The sun wasn't too strong, but it was enough to start melting the thick layer of snow covering the car and the road. By midday, they made it into the city. Not too big, but big enough to have a gas station, lodgings, and a small shop selling hot food. The Hyundai pulled over by the side of the road. The 4 lives inside stepped out, soaked, tired, but intact. There was something in their eyes, and in Heiko's slow wagging tail, that couldn't be named. Maybe it was hope, maybe it was survival, or maybe it was simply, we made it.